Hello, everyone. This is Chapter 2, Part 1, Midterm Review. Um, Chapter 2 deals with ethical speaking criterias, guidelines for ethical listening, plagiarism, so basically just ethics in general. So this video, I'm going to cover ethical speaking criteria, guidelines for ethical listening, and the key terms for the chapter. I will be going over plagiarism in a part 2 video, so stay tuned for that. So first, we're going to go over the ethical speaking criteria. These can be found for further reading on pages 29 to 33. So the first criteria of 5 is to make sure your goals are ethically sound. For example, if you are a lobbyist in Congress for big tobacco, so this means that your job is going to Congress and asking Congress people to write laws that don't restrict the abilities that big tobacco companies have in producing and distributing and advertising their product, even though there have been many studies showing that any kind of tobacco consumption can cause many different types of cancer. You know that in the back of your head, but you're choosing to ignore it to lobby for big tobacco companies to continue what they're selling. Whether that's for a paycheck or not, that's up to you, but it's not ethically sound. Your goals are not ethically sound there. Moving on to the second criteria is be fully prepared for each speech. Meaning, don't waste the listener's time by not knowing what you're going to say. Don't waste your time by not knowing what you're going to say, because not only is it going to be awkward, but some people might get frustrated that you're wasting their time. The third criteria of ethical speaking is to be honest with what you say. This should go without saying. You shouldn't lie. Lying is bad. Therefore, you shouldn't lie in a speech. Kind of self-explanatory there. The fourth criteria of ethical speaking is to avoid name-calling and other forms of abusive language. We want to stay away from those things. We'll talk about later chapters about logical fallacies, and one of them is actually ad hominem, which means against the man, which means when your rebuttal or your argument is basically, that isn't true because I don't like that person. It's a very shallow reason, and it makes no sense, therefore not logical, and not ethical either. The fifth and final ethical speaking criteria is to put ethical principles into practice. So, simply put, this is practice what you preach. Simple as that. The first password of this video is television. So, the next portion of this video, I will be talking about guidelines for ethical listening. Listening is not the same thing as hearing. You can hear a lot of things in your life throughout the day, but that doesn't mean that you're absorbing and keeping the information you hear. Hearing is a passive action. Listening is an active action, meaning when you're hearing something and you pay attention, it becomes listening. So here are the 3 guidelines for ethical listening. The first one is to be courteous and attentive. This means don't text, don't answer phone calls, don't talk, don't send messages to your friends or notes or whatever during a speech. You want to show that you are paying attention to the speech giver. They're nervous, and honestly, the last thing anybody wants when they talk is for nobody to pay attention to them. I'm sure you've felt ignored when you've talked in a conversation and no one listened, or other people interrupted or spoke over you, and you don't want to give You don't want to cause that feeling in the speech giver by you causing those interruptions and such. The second guideline for ethical listening is to avoid prejudging the speaker. This all encompasses it's basically don't judge a book by its cover, but this encompasses things like, oh, I don't like that person, so I'm not going to listen. Oh, I don't like the speech topic that they've chosen, so I'm not going to listen. No. Listen anyway. It could actually turn out to be pretty beneficial on both parts. This leads me to the third and final guideline of ethical speaking, which is maintain a free and open expression of ideas. Everybody has their own opinion, and everybody is entitled and has the right to their own opinion. Your job is not to change people's opinion, it's just to inform them on your side of the story, basically. And on the facts, depending on what speech you're giving. So, that is it for the first portion of this video, and the second password is carpet. The key terms of this chapter are as follows. The first one is ethics. It can be found on page 28. The definition of ethics, as according to your book, is the branch of philosophy that deals with issues of right and wrong in human affairs. So we've been taught right and wrong from when we were very young. That is ethics. Ethical decisions, which is found on page 29, is sound ethical decisions involve weighing a potential course of action against a set of ethical standards or guidelines. So this goes back to the first criteria of ethical speaking, of making sure your goals are ethically sound, and that example that I gave. Name calling is found on page 32, and the definition is the use of language to defame, demean, or degrade individuals or groups. We don't want to do that in any way. The next key term is Bill of Rights. So, as we know from our many history classes in our lives, the Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution. If you need a refresher, that's on page 32. Then there are 5 more keywords. That is plagiarism, global plagiarism, patchwork plagiarism, incremental plagiarism, and paraphrase. And I will be going more in depth with those in chapter 2, part 2 video to come. So stay tuned for that.